Princess Caroline woke up every morning at exactly 6 o'clock. Not because she wanted to, but because that was what the schedule said. The schedule ruled her life. Every minute of every day was planned by other people. She opened her eyes and looked at the golden ceiling above her bed. The room was huge and beautiful, but it felt like a prison. The walls were covered with expensive paintings that she never chose. The furniture was old and fancy, but it was not comfortable. Everything in the palace was perfect, but nothing felt like home to her. Caroline was 23 years old. She was the daughter of Prince Rainier and Grace Kelly, the famous movie star who became a princess. People all over the world knew her face. They took pictures of her everywhere she went. They wrote stories about her clothes, her hair, and who she talked to. But nobody really knew who she was inside. The princess got out of bed and walked to the big window. She could see the blue Mediterranean Sea in the distance. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky pink and orange. It was beautiful, but she could not enjoy it. She knew that in 30 minutes her lady-in-waiting would come to dress her. Then she would have breakfast with her parents. After that, there would be meetings, photo sessions, and public appearances. The same thing happened every day. Caroline remembered when she was a little girl. She used to run in the palace gardens and climb trees. She would hide behind the big bushes and pretend she was just a normal child. But as she grew older, the rules became stricter. She had to walk a certain way. She had to talk a certain way. She had to smile even when she was sad. Her mother, Princess Grace, tried to help her understand. "Being a princess is not easy," she would say, "but it is our duty to serve our people." Caroline loved her mother, but she did not understand why. Duty had to mean giving up everything she wanted for herself. The door opened and Marie, her lady-in-waiting, came in with a cup of tea. Marie was 50 years old and had worked in the palace for 20 years. She was kind, but she followed the rules exactly. "Good morning, Your Highness," she said with a small bow. "Your dress for today is ready." Caroline looked at the dress hanging on the door. It was blue and very formal. She hated it, but she did not say anything. She had learned long ago that complaining did not change anything. The dress was chosen to match the theme of the charity event she would attend that afternoon. As Marie helped her get dressed, Caroline thought about her friend Isabella, who lived in Paris. Isabella was also 23, but she could choose her own clothes. She could go to cafes with her friends. She could study what she wanted at university. She could even date boys without the whole world watching. Caroline felt jealous, but also guilty for feeling that way. After getting dressed, Caroline went downstairs for breakfast. The dining room was enormous, with a table that could seat 30 people, but only 3 chairs were used, one for her father, one for her mother, and one for her. The room felt empty and cold. Prince Rainier was already reading the newspaper when she arrived. He looked up and smiled at his daughter. "Good morning, Caroline. Did you sleep well?" "Yes, Papa," she answered, even though it was not true. She had trouble sleeping most nights. Her mind was always busy thinking about all the things she could not do. Princess Grace came in wearing a perfect dress and perfect makeup. Even at breakfast, she looked ready for a photo shoot. "Good morning, darling," she said, kissing Caroline on the cheek. "Are you ready for today's events?" Caroline nodded and sat down. The cook had prepared eggs, fresh fruit, and pastries. Everything looked delicious, but Caroline was not hungry. She ate a little bit because she knew her parents would worry if she did not eat anything. During breakfast, her father talked about the business meetings he would have that day. Monaco was a small country, but it was very rich. Many important people wanted to meet with Prince Rainier. Caroline listened, but she felt like she was watching someone else's life. "Caroline," her mother said, "remember that the photographer will be at the charity event today. Please smile and be friendly with the children." Caroline had attended hundreds of charity events. She knew exactly what to do. She would smile, shake hands, and say nice things. The newspapers would write about how kind and beautiful she was. But inside she felt empty. After breakfast, Caroline had a lesson with her tutor. She was supposed to learn about history and politics. The tutor was a serious man who talked about wars and kings from long ago. Caroline tried to pay attention, but she kept thinking about the books she really wanted to read. She loved stories and poetry, but those were not considered important for a princess. At 10 o'clock, she had a meeting with the palace staff about next week's events. They showed her photographs of the places she would visit and the people she would meet. Everything was planned perfectly. There was no room for surprises or changes. Caroline sat in the meeting and nodded at the right times, but inside her head, she was somewhere else. She imagined herself walking through the streets of Paris like a normal person. She thought about sitting in a small cafe, reading a book, and drinking coffee. Nobody would know who she was. Nobody would take her picture or ask her to smile. The meeting lasted for an hour. When it was over, Caroline felt tired, even though the day had just started. She had 4 more hours before the charity event. She would spend that time getting her hair and makeup done, practicing her speech, and being fitted for different shoes. As she walked back to her room, Caroline passed a mirror in the hallway. She stopped and looked at herself. She saw a beautiful young woman in an expensive dress, but she did not recognize the person looking back at her. The real Caroline was hidden somewhere deep inside, buried under all the rules and expectations. She touched the mirror with her hand and whispered, "Who am I really?" But the reflection had no answer. It just stared back at her with sad, tired eyes. Caroline knew that millions of people would trade places with her in a second. She lived in a palace. She had beautiful clothes and jewelry. She traveled to amazing places. But none of that mattered because she was not free to be herself. That night, after the charity event was over and all the guests had gone home, Caroline sat on her bed and cried. She cried quietly so nobody would hear her. She cried for the life she wanted but could never have. She cried for the girl she used to be before the world told her who she had to become. Tomorrow would be exactly the same as today. And the day after that would be the same too. Caroline felt like she was disappearing one day at a time, until nothing would be left except the perfect princess that everyone expected her to be. Lieutenant Marcus Beaumont stood perfectly still at his post outside the palace library. He had been a royal guard for 6 months now, and he still felt strange wearing the fancy uniform. The blue jacket with gold buttons was very different from the military clothes he used to wear when he served in the French Foreign Legion. Marcus was 28 years old and had spent 5 years as a soldier in Africa and the Middle East. He had seen war and danger. He had protected important people in difficult places, but guarding a princess in a peaceful palace was much harder than he expected, not because of the danger, but because of what he saw every day. He watched Princess Caroline walk through the palace halls like a ghost. She was beautiful and always perfectly dressed, but her eyes looked empty. Marcus had been trained to notice everything, and he noticed that the princess never really smiled. She moved her mouth into the shape of a smile, but her eyes stayed sad. The other guards did not talk about the royal family. They were told to watch, protect, and stay silent. Marcus understood this rule, but it bothered him. In the army, soldiers took care of each other. If someone was hurt or in trouble, you helped them. But in the palace, everyone pretended not to see anything wrong. Marcus had grown up in a small village in southern France. His father was a baker, and his mother was a teacher. They were not rich, but they were happy. His family laughed together at dinner. They argued sometimes, but they hugged afterward. The palace was quiet and cold compared to his childhood home. When Marcus first got the job as a royal guard, his father was very proud. "You will protect the princess," he said. "That is an important job." Marcus thought it would be easy. He was strong and well-trained. He could handle any danger that might come to the royal family. But after 6 months, Marcus realized that Princess Caroline was already in danger. Not from enemies or criminals, but from her own life. She was drowning in rules and expectations, and nobody seemed to notice or care. Every morning, Marcus watched Caroline walk to the breakfast room. She moved slowly, like every step was difficult. Her shoulders were always tense, and she kept her hands folded tightly in front of her, Sometimes she would stop walking and take a deep breath as if she was preparing for something difficult. During public events, Marcus stood near the princess to protect her from crowds. He could see her face when she thought nobody was looking. Between the smiles and waves, her expression would change. She looked scared and tired. Sometimes her hands would shake a little when she had to give speeches. Marcus remembered one afternoon, when Princess Caroline visited a school for disabled children. She sat with the children and read them stories. For a few minutes, her face looked different. She was really smiling, not the fake smile she used for cameras. She laughed when the children said funny things. She looked like a real person, not just a princess. But as soon as the cameras started flashing, her face changed back to the royal mask. She became stiff and formal again. Marcus could see the real Caroline disappearing as she remembered who she was supposed to be. The other guards talked about sports and their families during their breaks, but Marcus found himself thinking about the princess. He wondered what she was really like when nobody was watching. He wondered what made her happy, what she dreamed about, what she wanted to do with her life. One evening, Marcus was patrolling the palace gardens when he saw Princess Caroline sitting alone on a bench. She was supposed to be at a formal dinner, but she had somehow escaped. She was still wearing her evening dress, but she had taken off her shoes and was walking barefoot in the grass. Marcus should have approached her and reminded her about the dinner. That was his job. But something stopped him. She looked so peaceful for the first time since he had been working at the palace. She was looking up at the stars and breathing deeply. She looked like a normal young woman enjoying a quiet moment. Marcus stayed hidden behind a tree and watched over her from a distance. He made sure she was safe, but he did not interrupt her moment of freedom. After 30 minutes, Caroline put her shoes back on and walked slowly back to the palace. Marcus followed at a distance to make sure she got inside safely. The next day, Marcus was assigned to accompany Princess Caroline to a museum opening. As they walked through the art galleries, he noticed that she stopped for a long time in front of certain paintings. She was not just looking at them because she was supposed to. She was really seeing them and thinking about them. There was one painting of a woman sitting by a window looking out at the ocean. Princess Caroline stared at it for several minutes. Marcus could see tears forming in her eyes. The painting showed someone who looked lonely and trapped, just like Caroline. "It's beautiful," Caroline whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Marcus wanted to say something, but he remembered his training. Guards were not supposed to have conversations with the royal family unless they were asked a direct question. But he felt sorry for the princess. She seemed so alone even when she was surrounded by people. During the walk back to the palace, Caroline suddenly stopped walking. She was in the middle of giving an interview to a reporter, but she just stopped talking. She looked confused and scared. The reporter kept asking questions, but Caroline could not answer. Marcus stepped forward quickly. "I'm sorry," he said to the reporter. "The princess needs to return to the palace immediately for an important meeting." It was not true, but it gave Caroline a way to escape the situation. As they walked away, Caroline looked at Marcus with surprise. No one had ever helped her like that before. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're welcome, Your Highness," Marcus replied. That was the first real conversation they had ever had. It was only a few words, but something changed between them. Marcus had shown that he cared about her as a person, not just as a princess. He was paid to protect. From that day on, Caroline seemed to notice Marcus more. When she walked through the palace, she would look for him. If their eyes met, she would give him a small, real smile. Not the royal smile she used for everyone else, but a grateful smile that said, "Thank you for seeing me." Marcus began to understand that his job was not just about protecting Princess Caroline from outside dangers. She needed someone to protect her from the loneliness and sadness that was eating away at her from the inside. He started paying attention to small things that might make her feel better. If she looked especially tired, he would make sure she had a clear path to walk without being bothered by staff members. If she seemed overwhelmed during public events, he would position himself where she could see him, so she would know someone was watching out for her. Marcus knew he was walking A dangerous line. Getting too involved with the royal family could cost him his job. But he could not stop himself from caring about Caroline. She reminded him of wounded soldiers he had helped during the war, people who were hurt and needed someone to believe they could get better. Late at night, when Marcus was doing his rounds through the palace, he sometimes heard crying coming from Caroline's room. The sound broke his heart, but he could not do anything about it. He was just a guard, and she was a princess. There was a wall between them that seemed impossible to cross, but Marcus began to hope that maybe somehow he could find a way to help her. He did not know how yet, but he knew that Princess Caroline was drowning, and he was the only one who seemed to notice. In the army, you never left a soldier behind. Marcus decided that the same rule should apply to protecting a princess, even if she was drowning in her own life instead of in enemy territory. The worst day of Caroline's life started with a knock on her bedroom door at 5 in the morning. She was still sleeping when Marie, her lady-in-waiting, came in with an urgent message from her parents. Caroline needed to come to the royal office immediately for an important family meeting. Caroline put on a robe and walked quickly through the empty palace halls. Her bare feet were cold on the marble floors. She wondered what could be so important, that it could not wait until after breakfast. Maybe there was a problem with one of the charities she supported. Maybe there was bad news about a family member. When Caroline arrived at the office, both her parents were there. They were dressed formally even though it was still very early. Her father sat behind his big wooden desk and her mother stood beside him. They both looked serious, but also excited, like they had good news to share. "Caroline, please sit down," her father said, pointing to a chair across from his desk. "We have something wonderful to tell you." Caroline sat down and waited. She had learned to be patient when her parents had announcements to make. Usually these announcements were about new responsibilities or events she would have to attend. "Have been talking with the von Habsburg family from Germany," her mother began. "They have a very successful business empire, and they are one of the most respected families in Europe." Caroline nodded, but she did not understand why this mattered to her. "Their son Friedrich is 29 years old and very accomplished," her father continued. "He studied at the best universities and he will inherit his family's company someday. He is exactly the kind of man who would make a perfect husband for you." The words hit Caroline like a punch in the stomach. Husband? Marriage? She had never even heard of this Friedrich person before today. "We met with his parents last week in Switzerland," her mother said with a big smile. "They are wonderful people, and they are very interested in joining our families together. This marriage would be perfect for Monaco's economy and for your future." Caroline tried to speak, but no words came out. Her mouth felt dry and her heart was beating very fast. "But I don't know him," she finally managed to say. "Of course you don't know him yet," her father said. "That's why we have arranged for you to meet him next week. He will come here for dinner, and you can get to know each other." "This is such exciting news," her mother added. "Friedrich is handsome and intelligent. You will like him very much, I'm sure." Caroline felt like the room was spinning around her. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked. "We've been discussing it with his family for several months," her father answered. "We wanted to make sure everything was perfect before we told you." Several months. Her parents had been planning her entire future for months without asking her what she wanted. Caroline felt sick to her stomach. When would the wedding be?" Caroline asked, afraid to hear the answer. "Next spring," her mother said happily. "We'll have time to plan everything perfectly. It will be the most beautiful royal wedding Europe has seen in years. Next spring, that was only 8 months away. 8 months to say goodbye to any dreams she had for her own life." Caroline stood up from her chair. "I need time to think about this," she said. Her parents looked surprised. "What is there to think about?" her father asked. "This is a wonderful opportunity for you and for Monaco." "But I don't love him," Caroline said, her voice getting louder. "I don't even know him." "Love will come later," her mother said gently. "Your father and I learned to love each other after we were married. Many royal marriages start as partnerships and become love stories." Caroline knew this was not completely true. Her mother had been a famous movie star who chose to marry her father and become a princess. It was different from being told who to marry. "I want to choose my own husband," Caroline said. "I want to fall in love and marry someone I care about." Her father's face became stern. "Caroline, you are not a normal girl. You are a princess, and princesses have responsibilities. We cannot make decisions based only on feelings." "But it's my life," Caroline said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Your life belongs to Monaco and to our people," her father replied. "This marriage will make our country stronger and more prosperous. That is more important than your personal preferences." Caroline felt like she was drowning. The walls of the office seemed to be closing in around her. "Can I at least finish my studies first? I want to go to university in Paris like we talked about." "There will be no need for university now," her mother said. "You'll be too busy preparing for your wedding and learning how to manage Friedrich's household. Besides, married women don't need university degrees." This was the final blow. Caroline had dreamed of studying literature in Paris. She wanted to read books by great writers and learn about different cultures. She wanted to write stories of her own someday. But now all of those dreams were being taken away from her. "I won't do it," Caroline said, standing up. "You can't force me to marry someone I don't love." Her father stood up too, and his voice became very serious. "Caroline, you will do your duty to your family and your country. This discussion is over." Caroline ran out of the office and back to her room. She threw herself on her bed and cried, harder than she had ever cried before. All her life she had followed the rules and done what was expected of her. She had always believed that someday she would have more freedom to make her own choices. But now she realized that day would never come. Over the next few days, Caroline's life became even more controlled than before. Wedding planners came to the palace to discuss flowers, music, and decorations. Dress designers brought sketches of wedding gowns for her to look at. Everyone was excited about the royal wedding except for Caroline herself. The worst part was that everyone acted like she should be happy. The staff members smiled and congratulated her. Newspapers wrote articles about the fairy tale romance between the Monaco princess and the German businessman. But it was not a romance at all. It was just a business deal, and Caroline was the product being sold. Caroline stopped eating properly. Food tasted like nothing and her stomach was always upset. She lost weight and could not sleep at night. During the day, she moved through her responsibilities like a robot, smiling and nodding when people talked to her about the wedding. Marcus, the guard, noticed the changes in Caroline immediately. She looked smaller and more fragile than before. Her eyes, which had always been sad, now looked completely empty. When she walked through the palace, she moved very slowly, like every step required great effort. During public appearances, Caroline's hands shook more than usual. Sometimes she would forget what she was supposed to say in the middle of a speech. Once she even fainted during a charity event and had to be taken back to the palace immediately. Marcus wanted to help her, but he did not know how. He was just a guard, and she was dealing with problems much bigger than anything he could solve. But he watched over her more carefully than ever, worried that she might do something dangerous to herself. One afternoon, Caroline was supposed to attend a tea party with other young noble women from around Europe, but instead she disappeared from the palace. Marcus was part of the search team that looked for her everywhere. They found her 3 hours later, sitting by the ocean on a rocky cliff outside the city. She was still wearing her formal tea party dress, but she was soaked from the sea spray. She sat perfectly still, staring out at the water like she was hypnotized. Marcus was the one who approached her carefully. "Your Highness," he said gently, "everyone is worried about you." Caroline did not look at him. "I was thinking about what it would be like to just disappear," she said in a quiet voice. "To become part of the ocean and never have to worry about anything again." These words scared Marcus more than any danger he had faced as a soldier. He sat down on the rocks beside her, not caring that he was breaking protocol. "Your Highness," he said, "I know I'm not supposed to say this, but you don't have to disappear. There are other ways to solve problems. Caroline finally looked at him. Her eyes were red from crying and her face was pale. What other ways? She asked. I'm going to marry a man I don't love, and there's nothing I can do about it. Marcus looked around to make sure no one else could hear them. Maybe there is something you can do, he said carefully, but you have to want to fight for your life. For the first time in weeks, Caroline felt a tiny spark of hope. Someone finally understood that she was in trouble, and that same someone was suggesting that she might not be completely powerless. What do you mean? She asked. Marcus looked into her eyes and saw the real Caroline underneath all the royal training. She was scared and desperate, but she was also strong. She just needed someone to remind her of that strength. I mean that every person has the right to choose their own life, Marcus said. Even princesses. The dinner with Friedrich von Habsburg was scheduled for a Thursday evening in the palace's grand dining room. Caroline had been dreading this day for 2 weeks. She barely ate anything and could not concentrate on any of her daily activities. Every time someone mentioned Friedrich's name, she felt sick to her stomach. On the morning of the dinner, Caroline's mother took her shopping for a new dress. They went to the most expensive boutique in Monaco, where the owner had prepared several beautiful gowns for the princess to try on. You must look perfect tonight, Princess Grace said as Caroline stood in front of the mirror wearing a burgundy silk dress. First impressions are very important. Caroline looked at herself in the mirror and felt like she was looking at a stranger. The dress was beautiful, but it felt like a costume she was wearing to play a role in someone else's life. Do you think he will like me? Caroline asked, not because she cared about Friedrich's opinion, but because she hoped maybe he would reject her and the whole arrangement would fall apart. Of course he will like you, her mother replied. You are beautiful, intelligent, and well-educated. Any man would be lucky to marry you. But Caroline did not feel lucky. She felt like a prize being handed out to the winner of a contest she had never agreed to enter. That afternoon, while Caroline was having her hair done for the dinner, she kept thinking about what Marcus had said by the ocean. He had told her that every person has the right to choose their own life, even princesses. Those words had been running through her mind for days. At 6 o'clock, Friedrich arrived at the palace with his parents. Caroline watched from her bedroom window as their car pulled up to the main entrance. Friedrich stepped out first. He was tall and handsome, with blonde hair and expensive clothes. He looked exactly like the type of man her parents would choose for her. Caroline took a deep breath and walked downstairs to meet her future husband. In the main hallway, her parents were already greeting the von Habsburg family. Everyone was smiling and speaking in formal, polite voices. Caroline, her father said when he saw her coming down the stairs, I would like you to meet Friedrich von Habsburg. Friedrich stepped forward and took Caroline's hand. He kissed it gently and looked into her eyes. Your Highness, he said with a German accent, it is an honor to finally meet you. Your beauty is even greater than I was told. Caroline smiled, the royal smile she had practiced thousands of times. Thank you, she said. Welcome to Monaco. Friedrich was polite and well-mannered during their conversation before dinner. He told Caroline about his business interests and his travels around the world. He had been to many interesting places and had done impressive things. On paper, he was exactly the kind of man any woman would want to marry. But as Caroline listened to him talk, she felt nothing. No excitement, no curiosity, no attraction. Friedrich was like a character in a movie she was watching, not a real person she could imagine spending her life with. During dinner, the conversation focused mainly on business and politics. Friedrich's father talked about his companies and how they could benefit Monaco's economy. Caroline's father discussed trade agreements and financial partnerships. Caroline and Friedrich were barely included in the conversation, as if they were just pieces being moved around on a chessboard. After dinner, Caroline's parents suggested that she and Friedrich take a walk in the palace gardens so they could talk privately. Caroline wanted to refuse, but she knew she had no choice. The garden was beautiful in the moonlight, with flowers blooming and fountains creating a peaceful sound. Under different circumstances, it might have been romantic. But Caroline felt like she was walking to her own execution. "Your Highness," Friedrich said as they walked along a path lined with rose bushes, "I want you to know that I understand this arrangement might seem sudden to you." Caroline was surprised that he was being so direct. "Yes," she said, "it is quite sudden." "I hope you know that I will be a good husband to you," Friedrich continued. "I will provide for you and treat you with respect. I know we don't know each other well yet, but I believe we can build a good life together." Caroline appreciated his honesty, but his words made her feel even sadder. He was talking about their marriage like it was a business merger, not a love story. "Friedrich," Caroline said, stopping beside a fountain, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," he replied. "Do you want to marry me because you care about me or because your parents told you to?" Friedrich was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before. "I think you are very beautiful and seem like a nice person," he said. "But to be honest, this marriage was my parents' idea. They believe it will be good for both our families." Caroline felt relief and sadness at the same time. At least Friedrich was being honest with her. He did not pretend to be in love with her, which would have made everything worse. "So, neither of us really has a choice in this," Caroline said. "I suppose not," Friedrich admitted. "But maybe that's not such a bad thing. Many arranged marriages work out well. We could learn to care for each other over time." Caroline wanted to scream that she did not want to learn to care for someone. She wanted to fall in love with someone who made her heart beat faster and made her laugh. She wanted to choose her own husband based on her feelings, not on economic benefits for Monaco. But instead of screaming, Caroline just nodded. "Perhaps you're right," she said, even though she did not believe it at all. They walked back to the palace in silence. Friedrich was probably a good man, but Caroline knew she could never be happy married to him. The problem was not with Friedrich himself. The problem was that she was being forced to give up her dreams and her freedom. After Friedrich and his parents left, Caroline's family gathered in the sitting room to discuss how the evening had gone. "That went very well," her father said with satisfaction. "Friedrich seems like an excellent young man." "Did you like him, Caroline?" her mother asked. Caroline knew she was expected to say yes. She was supposed to be excited about marrying Friedrich and grateful for such a good match, but she could not lie anymore. "He seems nice," Caroline said carefully. "But I don't think I can marry him." The room became very quiet. Her parents stared at her like she had said something shocking. "What do you mean?" her father asked, his voice becoming stern. "I mean, I don't love him, and I don't think I ever will," Caroline said, her voice shaking. "I can't spend the rest of my life married to someone I feel nothing for." "Caroline," her mother said, "you barely know him. Love takes time to develop." "But what if it never develops?" Caroline asked. "What if I marry him and spend the next 50 years feeling empty and alone?" Her father stood up from his chair. "Caroline, this is not a game. Contracts have been signed. Announcements have been made. You cannot back out now just because you have cold feet." "These are not cold feet," Caroline said, standing up too. "This is me realizing that I cannot sacrifice my entire life for political reasons." "You are being selfish and childish," her father said angrily. "This marriage is bigger than your personal feelings. It is about the future of Monaco." Caroline felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she tried to stay strong. "What about my future?" she asked. "Don't I deserve to be happy?" "You will be happy," her mother said. "You will have a beautiful home, lovely children, and a husband who respects you. Many women would consider that a very happy life." "But it's not the life I want," Caroline said, her voice breaking. Her father's face became red with anger. "You will marry Friedrich von Habsburg next spring, and that is final. I don't want to hear any more complaints about this." Caroline ran out of the room and up the stairs to her bedroom. She slammed the door and threw herself on her bed. She cried until she could not cry anymore, and then she just lay there staring at the ceiling. Around midnight, Caroline got up and walked to her window. She could see the palace gardens where she had walked with Friedrich earlier that evening. In a few months, those gardens would be decorated with flowers for her wedding. Hundreds of people would come to watch her marry a man she did not love. Caroline opened her window and leaned out into the cool night air. She thought about what Marcus had said about every person having the right to choose their own life. But how could she choose when every door seemed to be locked? She was still standing at the window when she heard footsteps in the hallway outside her room. The footsteps stopped, and Caroline heard a very soft knock on her door. "Your Highness?" It was Marcus's voice. Caroline was surprised. Guards were not supposed to visit the royal family's private rooms at night unless there was an emergency. "Is everything all right?" Marcus asked through the door. Caroline opened the door just a little bit. Marcus was standing in the hallway in his uniform, looking concerned. "I heard crying," he said quietly. "I wanted to make sure you were safe." Caroline looked at Marcus and saw genuine worry in his eyes. He was the only person in the entire palace who seemed to care about how she was feeling. "I'm not safe," Caroline whispered. "I'm drowning, and nobody cares." Without thinking about protocol or consequences, Caroline opened the door wider and stepped into the hallway. She looked at Marcus with desperate eyes. "Please," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You have to help me. I can't do this anymore. I feel like I'm disappearing, like I'm becoming someone I don't recognize." Marcus stood in the palace hallway looking at Princess Caroline's tear-streaked face. Every rule he had learned as a royal guard told him to escort her back to her room and report this incident to his superior. His training, his job, his entire career depended on following protocol exactly. But Marcus was not just a guard. He was a human being who had spent months watching Caroline slowly break apart. He had seen her transform from a sad but hopeful young woman into someone who looked like she had given up on life completely. "Your Highness," Marcus said quietly, looking around to make sure no one else was in the hallway. "You need to go back to your room. If someone sees us talking like this, we'll both be in serious trouble." "I don't care about trouble anymore," Caroline whispered. "Nothing could be worse than what's happening to me now." Marcus could see that Caroline was at her breaking point. He had seen soldiers in similar states during the war, people who had been pushed too far and were ready to do something desperate. "Come with me," Marcus said, making a decision that went against everything he had been taught. "But we have to be very quiet." Marcus led Caroline through the palace to a small room that was used to store old furniture. It was hidden away from the main hallways, and no one ever went there at night. Once they were inside, Marcus turned on a small lamp and closed the door. "Now tell me what happened," he said gently. Caroline sat down on an old chair and told Marcus about the dinner with Friedrich, about the conversation in the garden, and about the fight with her parents afterward. As she talked, Marcus could see how trapped and hopeless she felt. "He seems like a nice enough person," Caroline said, "but I felt absolutely nothing when I looked at him. No connection, no interest, nothing. How can I promise to spend my whole life with someone who feels like a stranger?" Marcus had never been married, but he understood what Caroline meant. He had seen his parents together, and he knew what real love looked like. It was not something that could be arranged or forced. "Your Highness," Marcus said carefully, "what if you refuse to go through with the wedding?" Caroline laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "You don't understand. My father has already signed contracts. The wedding announcements have been sent to newspapers all over Europe. If I refuse to marry Friedrich now, it will be a huge scandal. It could damage Monaco's relationships with other countries." "But what about your relationship with yourself?" Marcus asked. "What good are you to Monaco if you're miserable and broken?" Caroline looked at Marcus with surprise. No one had ever suggested that her happiness was important to her ability to serve her country. "I've been thinking about what you said by the ocean," Caroline continued, "about how every person has the right to choose their own life. But I don't. See how that applies to me? I'm not like other people." Marcus shook his head. "You are exactly like other people. You have feelings and dreams and the right to be happy. The only difference is that other people have told you that your feelings don't matter." "But they don't matter, do they?" Caroline asked. "I'm a princess. My job is to do what's best for Monaco, not what makes me happy." "Says who?" Marcus asked. Who decided that being a princess means giving up your right to choose your own life? Caroline had never thought about it that way before. She had always accepted that being royal meant making sacrifices, but Marcus was asking her to question whether those sacrifices were really necessary. Even if you're right, Caroline said, it doesn't matter. There's nothing I can do about it. I can't just run away. Where would I go? How would I live? I don't know how to do anything except be a princess. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He was thinking about something that could get him fired, arrested, or worse. But looking at Caroline's desperate face, he decided to take the risk. Your Highness, he said slowly, what if there was another way? What do you mean? Caroline asked. Marcus took a deep breath. What if you could disappear for a while? Long enough to think clearly about what you really want. Long enough to experience what life is like when you can make your own choices. Caroline stared at him. Are you suggesting that I run away? I'm suggesting that you take some time to figure out who you really are, Marcus said. Away from all the pressure and expectations. Away from people telling you what you have to do. That's impossible, Caroline said. Everyone knows who I am. My picture is in newspapers all the time. Where could I possibly go without being recognized? There are ways, Marcus said. I have contacts from my time in the military, people who know how to help someone disappear when they need to. Caroline felt a strange mixture of excitement and terror. The idea of escaping seemed impossible, but it also seemed like the only way to save herself. But what about you? Caroline asked. If you helped me, you would lose your job. You could go to jail. Marcus shrugged. I've been in dangerous situations before. Besides, what's the point of having a job if it means watching someone destroy themselves and not being able to help? Caroline looked into Marcus's eyes and saw something she had not seen in anyone else at the palace. Genuine care for her as a person, not as a princess. Why would you risk everything to help me? She asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Because, in the army, we had a rule. You never leave a soldier behind. It doesn't matter if they're in enemy territory or drowning in a river or trapped in a burning building. You do whatever it takes to get them to safety. But I'm not a soldier, Caroline said. No, Marcus agreed, but you're drowning just the same. And I can't stand by and watch it happen. Caroline felt tears coming to her eyes again, but this time they were different. For the first time in months, someone was offering her hope instead of just telling her to accept her fate. How would it work? She asked quietly. Marcus smiled for the first time since Caroline had known him. Leave that to me. But first, you have to decide if you really want to do this. Once we start, there's no going back. Everything will change. Caroline thought about Friedrich and the wedding dress that was being made for her. She thought about spending the rest of her life pretending to be happy while slowly dying inside. She thought about never getting to study literature or travel on her own or fall in love with someone she actually cared about. Then she thought about what it would feel like to wake up in the morning and choose what to do with her day. She thought about walking down a street without anyone taking her picture or telling her how to behave. She thought about being just Caroline, not Princess Caroline. What if I'm not brave enough? She asked. You're braver than you think, Marcus said. It takes courage to admit that your life isn't working. Most people just accept whatever happens to them, but you're willing to fight for something better. Caroline stood up from the old chair and walked to the small window in the storage room. She could see the palace gardens outside, where she had walked with Friedrich just a few hours earlier. If I do this, she said without turning around, I might lose everything. My family, my home, my title. I might never be able to come back. That's true, Marcus said honestly. But what have you really got to lose? You're already losing yourself. Caroline turned around and looked at Marcus. For the first time since she could remember, she felt like she had a real choice to make. Not a choice between two things other people wanted for her, but a choice between the life she was being forced to live and the life she might be able to create for herself. How long would I have to decide? She asked. Not long, Marcus said. The longer we wait, the harder it will be. Wedding preparations are starting soon, and security around you will get tighter. Caroline nodded. She understood that this was probably her only chance to escape. I need to think about it, she said. Of course, Marcus replied. But Your Highness, whatever you decide, you need to know something. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to choose your own life. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. As they left the storage room and walked quietly back through the palace, Caroline felt like she was seeing everything with new eyes. The expensive paintings and fancy furniture no longer looked beautiful to her. They looked like the decorations in a very elegant prison. Back in her room, Caroline lay in bed and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. She thought about everything Marcus had said. She thought about what it would be like to live without constant supervision and endless rules. She thought about what it would be like to discover who she really was when no one was telling her who she had to be. By morning, Caroline had made her decision. She was going to take back her life, no matter what it cost her. The next morning, Caroline woke up feeling different than she had in months. Instead of the heavy sadness that usually weighed her down, she felt nervous energy running through her body. She had made a decision that scared her, but it also gave her hope for the first time in a long while. Caroline went through her normal morning routine, but everything felt strange now that she knew it might be one of the last times she would wake up in the palace. She looked at her expensive clothes and jewelry and wondered what it would be like to own just a few simple things instead of closets full of formal gowns she never chose. During breakfast with her parents, Caroline tried to act normally. Her father read the newspaper and talked about his meetings for the day. Her mother discussed plans for Caroline's engagement party, which would be held in 2 weeks. The guest list is almost complete, Princess Grace said excitedly. We'll have over 300 people, including several royal families from other countries. It will be a magnificent celebration. Caroline nodded and smiled, but inside she was thinking about how all those people would be celebrating something. That made her miserable. She wondered what they would think if they knew the truth about how she felt. After breakfast, Caroline had a dress fitting for her engagement party gown. The designer was a famous woman from Paris who had made dresses for movie stars and royalty. She fussed over Caroline pinning and adjusting the beautiful blue silk dress. You look absolutely stunning, Your Highness, the designer said. Prince Friedrich will not be able to take his eyes off you. Caroline looked at herself in the mirror and saw a beautiful young woman in an expensive dress. But she felt like she was looking at someone else, someone playing the role of a happy princess getting ready for her engagement party. While the designer worked, Caroline's mother sat nearby, looking through magazines with pictures of wedding decorations. I think white roses and baby's breath would be lovely for the ceremony, she said. Very classic and elegant. Caroline wanted to scream that she did not care about flowers or decorations for a wedding she did not want. But instead, she just stood still and let the designer continue her work. That afternoon, Caroline found an excuse to walk in the palace gardens. She needed fresh air and time to think about what she was planning to do. As she walked along the path where she had talked with Friedrich, she saw Marcus standing guard near the main gate. Caroline walked over to him slowly, pretending to admire the flowers nearby. When she was close enough, she spoke quietly without looking at him. I've made my decision, she said. I want to do it. Marcus did not show any reaction on his face, but Caroline could see relief in his eyes. Are you sure? He asked. Yes, Caroline said. I'd rather take the risk than live the rest of my life as someone else's idea of who I should be. Then we need to start making plans, Marcus said quietly. But we have to be very careful. If anyone suspects what we're doing, it will be over before it starts. Caroline nodded. What do I need to do? For now, just act normally, Marcus said. I'll handle most of the preparations, but there are a few things you'll need to get ready, without anyone noticing. Marcus told Caroline to gather some simple clothes that she could travel in. Not her usual formal dresses, but the most normal-looking things she owned. She should also collect any money she had access to, but not so much that people would notice it was missing. When will we do it? Caroline asked. Next week, Marcus said. During the charity gala your parents are hosting. There will be so many people and so much activity that it will take longer for anyone to notice you're gone. Caroline felt her heart beating faster. Next week seemed very soon. But she knew Marcus was right. The longer they waited, the more dangerous it would become. Over the next few days, Caroline carefully collected the things she would need. She found some casual dresses and pants that she had worn for private moments in the palace. She gathered the small amount of cash she kept in her room for personal expenses. She also took a few pieces of simple jewelry that she could sell if necessary. The hardest part was acting normal around her family and the palace staff. Caroline had to smile and participate in conversations about her engagement party and wedding plans. She had to pretend to be excited about flowers and guest lists and menu choices. During these conversations, Caroline learned more details about her future that made her even more determined to escape. Friedrich's family expected her to move to Germany after the wedding. She would live in their family castle and help manage their social obligations. There was no mention of her continuing her education or pursuing her own interests. Friedrich's mother is so excited to have a daughter-in-law to help with the family's charity work, Caroline's mother said during one of their planning sessions. She has such wonderful ideas for events you could organize together. Caroline smiled and nodded, but inside she was thinking about how her entire future was being planned without anyone asking what she wanted to do with her life. Meanwhile, Marcus was making his own preparations. He used his military contacts to arrange safe transportation and temporary housing. He obtained fake identification papers that would allow Caroline to travel without being recognized. He even found someone who could help Caroline apply to universities, under a different name. The most difficult part of Marcus's plan was figuring out how to get Caroline out of the palace without being seen. Security was always tight, but it would be especially careful during the charity gala when there would be many important guests. Marcus studied the palace layout and the security schedules. He found a route through the kitchen area and old servant passages that would be less monitored during the party. He also arranged for a car to be waiting at a specific location outside the palace grounds. 3 days before the gala, Marcus had a brief private conversation with Caroline in the palace library. He gave her a detailed map of the escape route and explained exactly what she would need to do. At 9 o'clock during the dinner service, you'll excuse yourself from the party, Marcus said. Tell your parents you need to change your shoes or fix your makeup. Something that will give you at least 30 minutes before anyone expects you back. Caroline memorized every detail of the plan. She would change into the casual clothes she had hidden in a storage room. She would leave through the kitchen area and follow the old servant passages to an exit near the palace gardens. Marcus would meet her there with the car. What about after we leave? Caroline asked. Where will we go? First, to a safe house about 2 hours from here, Marcus explained. We'll stay there for a few days while we arrange new identification for you. Then we'll travel to Paris where you can start a new life. Caroline felt excited and terrified at the same time. Paris had always been her dream destination. She had wanted to study at the Sorbonne and live in a small apartment near the river. Now that dream might actually come true. There's something else we need to discuss, Marcus said seriously. Once we do this, there's no going back quickly. You'll have to stay hidden for a long time, maybe years. Are you prepared for that? Caroline thought about what she would be giving up. She would not see her parents or her friends. She would not have access to her money or possessions. She would have to learn how to live as a regular person without servants or protection. But then she thought about what she would gain. Freedom to make her own choices. The ability to pursue her education and interests. The chance to meet people who would care about her as a person, not as a princess. The possibility of finding real love someday with someone she chose. I'm prepared, Caroline said. I know it won't be easy, but it has to be better than living a lie for the rest of my life. Marcus smiled at her with admiration. You're braver than most soldiers I've known, he said. On the night before the charity gala, Caroline lay in bed and thought about everything that would change in the next 24 hours. She was about to leave behind everything she had ever known for a completely uncertain future. Caroline got up and walked to her window one last time. She looked out at the palace gardens and the view of the Mediterranean Sea beyond. It was beautiful, but it was also a prison. Tomorrow night, she would be free to see whatever view she chose. For the first time in months, Caroline fell asleep, easily. She dreamed about walking through the streets of Paris as just another young woman, anonymous and free to discover who she really was underneath all the royal training and expectations. Tomorrow would be the most important day of her life. The day of the charity gala arrived with perfect weather. The sun was shining and there was a gentle breeze coming from the Mediterranean Sea. Caroline woke up knowing that this would be either the last day of her old life or the day her escape plan failed completely. Caroline went through her normal morning routine, but every action felt significant. This might be the last time she would eat breakfast in the palace dining room. This might be the last time she would wear one of her expensive royal gowns. This might be the last time she would see her parents. That thought made Caroline feel guilty and sad. Despite everything that had happened, she loved her parents. She knew they thought they were doing what was best for her and for Monaco. But they could not understand that their idea of what was best was slowly killing her spirit. During the day, Caroline helped with final preparations for the gala. Flowers were arranged throughout the palace. The grand ballroom was decorated with golden lights and elegant table settings. The kitchen staff prepared food for 300 guests, including several royal families and important business leaders from around Europe. "Everything looks perfect," Caroline's mother said as they walked through the ballroom together. "This will be one of the most successful charity events we've ever hosted." Caroline smiled and agreed, but she was thinking about how all this beauty and elegance felt meaningless when she was not free to enjoy it. At 6 o'clock, Caroline began getting ready for the gala. Marie, her lady-in-waiting, helped her into a stunning gold dress that had been designed especially for this event. The dress was beautiful, but Caroline felt like she was putting on armor for battle rather than getting dressed for a party. While Marie did her hair and makeup, Caroline thought about the casual clothes she had hidden in the storage room earlier that day. In a few hours, she would change into those simple clothes and become a different person. The thought made her hands shake slightly. "Are you nervous about tonight, Your Highness?" Marie asked, noticing Caroline's trembling hands. "A little," Caroline said, which was not really a lie. She was extremely nervous, just not about the charity gala. At 7:30, the first guests began arriving at the palace. Caroline stood with her parents in the receiving line, greeting each person who came through the door. She smiled and made polite conversation, but inside she was counting the minutes until 9 o'clock. Friedrich arrived with his parents at 8 o'clock. He looked handsome in his formal evening wear, and he was polite and charming to everyone he met. Caroline felt sorry for him, knowing that tomorrow he would wake up to news that would embarrass and confuse him. "You look absolutely beautiful tonight," Friedrich said when he kissed Caroline's hand in greeting. "Thank you," Caroline replied, feeling guilty about what she was planning to do to him. During dinner, Caroline sat at the head table between Friedrich and a famous businessman from Italy. She made conversation and laughed at their jokes, but she felt like she was watching herself from outside her body. This was the last time she would ever sit at a royal dinner table. At exactly 9 o'clock, Caroline excused herself from the table. "I need to go fix my makeup," she told Friedrich. "I'll be back in a few minutes." Caroline walked calmly out of the ballroom and into the main hallway. Her heart was beating so fast that she could hear it in her ears, but she forced herself to move slowly and normally. If she rushed or looked nervous, someone might notice and ask questions. Caroline made her way to the storage room where she had hidden her escape clothes earlier that day. She quickly changed out of her gold gown and into a simple blue dress and flat shoes. She left her expensive jewelry on the table and took only a small purse with her identification papers and money. Looking at herself in a small mirror, Caroline barely recognized the person staring back at her. Without the royal gown and elaborate hairstyle, she looked like any normal young woman. It was exactly what she wanted. Caroline carefully made her way through the palace using the route Marcus had shown her. She avoided the main hallways where guests and staff would be walking. Instead, she used old servant passages that most people had forgotten existed. The hardest part was getting through the kitchen area, where staff members were busy serving dinner to the gala guests. Caroline waited until the servers were all in. the dining room, then quickly crossed through the kitchen and into the corridor that led to the old exit near the gardens. Her heart almost stopped when she ran into a young kitchen worker coming back for more plates. But the worker was in a hurry and barely looked at Caroline. "Excuse me," the worker said, rushing past without recognizing the princess. Caroline finally reached the exit near the palace gardens. Her hands were shaking as she opened the door and stepped outside into the cool evening air. She had made it out of the palace without being caught. Marcus was waiting for her exactly where he had promised to be. He was dressed in civilian clothes instead of his guard uniform, and he had a car parked behind some trees where it could not be seen from the palace. "Are you all right?" Marcus asked when he saw how nervous Caroline looked. "I think so," Caroline said, looking back at the palace one last time. She could see lights from the charity gala and hear faint music coming from the ballroom. Her parents and Friedrich were probably wondering where she was by now. "We need to leave immediately," Marcus said. "It won't be long before they realize you're not coming back." Caroline got into the passenger seat of the car and Marcus started the engine. As they drove away from the palace, Caroline felt a mixture of relief and terror. She had actually done it. She had escaped from her royal life. But as they drove through the streets of Monaco, Caroline began to realize how serious this step was. In a few hours, the palace would be in chaos. Her parents would be frantic with worry. Security guards would be searching everywhere for her. The news would spread to newspapers around the world. "Are you having second thoughts?" Marcus asked, noticing how quiet Caroline had become. "No," Caroline said firmly. "I'm scared, but I'm not changing my mind. This is the right thing to do." They drove for 2 hours through the French countryside before reaching the safe house Marcus had arranged. It was a small cottage owned by a friend of Marcus who had also served in the military. The friend Pierre was waiting for them with food and fresh clothes. "Welcome," Pierre said to Caroline. "You are safe here. No one will think to look for you in this place." The cottage was simple but comfortable. It had 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a living room with books and magazines. After months of living in the palace, the simplicity felt wonderful to Caroline. "What happens now?" Caroline asked as the 3 of them sat around the kitchen table drinking coffee. "Now we wait," Marcus said. "By tomorrow morning, the news will be everywhere. They'll be looking for both of us, so we need to stay hidden until things calm down a little." Caroline nodded, but she was thinking about her parents. They would be devastated and worried sick about her safety. She wished there was a way to let them know she was all right without revealing where she was. "I need to write a letter," Caroline said suddenly. "Something that explains why I did this. My parents deserve to know that I'm safe and that this wasn't anyone's fault but my own choice." Marcus looked concerned. "That could be dangerous. Any communication could help them track us down." "I won't mail it from here," Caroline said. "But they need to understand that I didn't do this to hurt them. I did it to save myself." Caroline spent the next hour writing a letter to her parents. She tried to explain how trapped and hopeless she had felt. She told them that she loved them but could not live the life they had planned for her. She assured them that she was safe and that she hoped someday they would understand and forgive her. As Caroline wrote the letter, she realized that for the first time in years, she was making a choice completely on her own. She was choosing what to say, how to say it, and when to say it. It was a small thing, but it felt like a miracle. Outside the cottage, Caroline could hear normal sounds: birds singing, cars driving on a distant road, a dog barking somewhere nearby. These were the sounds of regular life, the life she had never been allowed to experience. Caroline went to bed that night in a simple room with plain furniture and inexpensive sheets. She had never slept anywhere so ordinary, and she had never felt so hopeful about the future. Tomorrow she would wake up as a free person for the first time in her life. She would have to figure out how to live without servants, how to cook her own food, and how to navigate the world without a royal title to open doors for her. It would not be easy, but it would be her choice, and that made all the difference in the world. Caroline woke up in the small cottage bedroom to the sound of birds singing outside her window. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then she remembered. She was free. She had actually escaped from the palace and from the marriage that would have destroyed her spirit. But her happiness quickly turned to worry when she heard voices coming from the cottage's main room. Caroline got dressed quickly and went to see what was happening. Marcus was standing in the living room with Pierre, both of them looking at a television screen. Caroline could see news reporters standing outside the palace in Monaco. The headline, at the bottom of the screen, read, "Princess Caroline missing, international search underway." "How bad is it?" Caroline asked, sitting down on the couch. "Pretty bad," Marcus said honestly. "They're calling it a kidnapping. Police from 3 countries are looking for you. Your father has offered $1 million reward for information about your whereabouts." Caroline felt sick to her stomach. She had known there would be consequences, but seeing the panic and chaos on the news made it all feel very real. "They think someone took you against your will," Pierre explained. "They have no idea that you left on your own." On the television screen, Caroline could see her father giving a press conference. He looked older than she had ever seen him, and his voice shook as he begged for her safe return. Her mother stood beside him, crying and holding a handkerchief. "We just want our daughter to come home safely," Prince Rainier said to the cameras. "If someone has taken her, please let her go. She is innocent and has never hurt anyone." Caroline started crying as she watched her parents' pain. She had not wanted to hurt them, but she could see that her escape had broken their hearts. "Maybe I should go back," Caroline said through her tears. "I can't stand seeing them suffer like this." Marcus turned off the television and sat down beside Caroline. "If you go back now, nothing will change. You'll still have to marry Friedrich. You'll still have to give up your dreams. The only difference is that security around you will be even tighter than before." Caroline knew Marcus was right, but it was hard to watch her parents suffer because of her choices. "What if I called them?" Caroline asked. "Just to let them know I'm safe?" "That would be too dangerous," Pierre said. "They would trace the call and find us within hours." Caroline spent the morning struggling with guilt and sadness. She had gained her freedom, but the price seemed too high. Every time she thought about her parents' worried faces, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Around noon, there was a knock at the cottage door. All 3 of them froze, wondering if somehow the police had found them already. Pierre looked out the window carefully before opening the door. It was Pierre's neighbor, an elderly woman named Madame Dubois. She lived alone in the cottage next door and often brought Pierre vegetables from her garden. "I brought you some tomatoes," she said, handing Pierre a basket. Then she noticed Caroline and Marcus sitting in the living room. "Oh, you have guests?" Madame Dubois said with interest. "How nice." Caroline panicked, wondering if the woman would recognize her from the news, but Madame Dubois just smiled and waved at them. "This is my niece Claire and her boyfriend," Pierre said quickly. "They're visiting from Paris." "How lovely," Madame Dubois said. "Young people should travel and see the world. Life is too short to stay in one place." After the woman left, Caroline realized something important. Madame Dubois had looked right at her and seen nothing but a normal young woman visiting her relative. Without the royal clothes and formal hairstyle, Caroline was invisible in the way she had always wanted to be. That afternoon, Caroline made a decision that surprised both Marcus and Pierre. She wanted to go for a walk in the nearby village. "That's too risky," Marcus said. "What if someone recognizes you?" "Look at me," Caroline said, pointing to her reflection in the cottage's small mirror. "I'm wearing a simple dress and shoes I bought at a regular store. My hair is in a ponytail and I'm not wearing any makeup. Do I look like a princess to you?" Marcus had to admit that Caroline looked completely different from the formal, elegant princess whose pictures appeared in magazines. Caroline walked into the village with Pierre, who introduced her to shopkeepers as his visiting niece. She bought bread at the bakery, picked out fruits and vegetables at the market, and had coffee at a small cafe. Nobody looked at her twice. For Caroline, it was like experiencing magic. She was walking freely through a town, talking to regular people and making her own choices about what to buy and where to go. It was everything she had dreamed about during her trapped years in the palace. But that evening, Caroline saw something on the news that changed everything. Marcus had been arrested. The news reporter explained that palace security had discovered that Lieutenant Marcus Beaumont was missing at the same time as Princess Caroline. They had found evidence in his room that connected him to her disappearance. He was now being held for questioning about the princess's kidnapping. Caroline watched in horror as Marcus was led away in handcuffs. His face was calm, but she could see worry in his eyes. He was taking the blame for everything to protect her. "They're going to put him in prison," Caroline said, starting to cry again. "This is all my fault." "Marcus knew this might happen," Pierre said gently. "He chose to help you anyway, but he doesn't deserve to be punished for helping me find my freedom," Caroline said. Caroline spent a sleepless night thinking about Marcus sitting in a jail cell because of her decision to escape. She thought about her parents' worry and pain. She thought about Friedrich, who was probably confused and embarrassed by the whole situation. By morning, Caroline had made up her mind about what she needed to do. "I'm going back," she told Pierre. "Are you sure?" Pierre asked. "Once you go back, you might never get another chance to escape." "I can't let Marcus go to prison for helping me," Caroline said. "And I can't let my parents suffer anymore. But I'm not going back to accept the life they planned for me. I'm going back to negotiate." Caroline wrote another letter, this one to her father. She explained that she had left on her own and that Marcus had only helped her because she had begged him to. She said she was ready to come home, but only if they could discuss new terms for her life. Pierre drove Caroline to a phone booth in a town far from the cottage. She called the palace and spoke directly to her father. "Papa, it's me," Caroline said when Prince Rainier answered the phone. "Caroline, oh my God, where are you? Are you hurt? Are you safe?" "I'm safe, Papa. I was never kidnapped. I left on my own because I couldn't go through with the marriage to Friedrich." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "Caroline, we need to talk," her father said finally. "Can you come home?" "Yes," Caroline said. "But first, you need to release Marcus. He didn't kidnap me. I asked him to help me, and he only did it because he was worried about my safety." "We'll discuss Marcus later," her father said. "Right now, I just want you to come home safely." 3 hours later, Caroline was back at the palace. Her parents hugged her for a long time, crying with relief that she was safe. But Caroline could see that something had changed in their eyes. They were looking at her differently, like they were seeing her clearly for the first time. "We need to talk about why you felt you had to run away," her mother said. For the next several hours, Caroline told her parents everything. She explained how trapped and hopeless she had felt. She told them about the panic attacks and the sleepless nights. She described how the engagement to Friedrich felt like a death sentence to her dreams and her spirit. "Why didn't you tell us how you felt?" her father asked. "I tried to," Caroline said. "But every time I objected to something, you told me it was my duty as a princess. You never asked what would make me happy or what I wanted for my future." Prince Rainier was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke in a voice that was softer than Caroline had ever heard from him. "I thought I was protecting you by arranging a good marriage," he said. "I thought I was giving you security and a bright future. I never realized I was taking away your freedom to choose." "I know you meant well, Papa," Caroline said. "But I need to be able to make my own decisions about my life, even if I make mistakes." Caroline's mother took her daughter's hands and looked into her eyes. "When I married your father, it was my choice," she said. "I gave up my movie career because I wanted to become a princess and help Monaco. But you're right, you should have the same freedom to choose that I had." Over the next few days, Caroline and her parents had many long conversations about her future. It was not easy, and sometimes they argued. But for the first time, they were really listening to each other. Caroline's father made several important decisions. First, he called off the engagement to Friedrich. He explained to the von Habsburg family that Caroline was not ready for marriage and apologized for any embarrassment the situation had caused. Second, he arranged for Caroline to attend the University of Paris to study literature, just as she had always dreamed of doing. She would live in a small apartment near the campus and have much more freedom than she had ever experienced before. Most importantly, he promised that Caroline would never again be forced into an arranged marriage. When she was ready to marry, it would be to someone she chose and loved. But you will always be a princess, her father said.